Imagine a world without light after sunset, without cooked food, without warmth in the biting cold. That was the reality for early humans, until one discovery changed everything. What was this revolutionary force that catapulted our ancestors from mere survival to unprecedented development? For millions of years, humanity existed in darkness, at the mercy of the elements. Then, a spark. Not just a spark of fire, but a spark of ingenuity that ignited the greatest transformation in human history. How did mastering this volatile element unlock a new era of survival, innovation, and ultimately, civilization? Welcome, dear listener, to Go to Sleep Historian. Tonight, we travel back to the dawn of humankind, to the moment when darkness first met its match. Settle in, breathe softly, and let the quiet story of fire guide you toward rest. Before we begin tonight's journey, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, please consider subscribing and pressing the bell icon so you never miss our next whisper from the past. Your support helps keep these calm stories glowing, and if you enjoy tonight's tale, a gentle like or a quiet comment below means more than you know. Now, let the world grow still around you. Close your eyes and imagine the first spark of light breaking through endless night. This is where our story begins, with a flicker in the dark. Tonight, we travel back to the dawn of humankind, to a world without cities, without words, without light after sunset. Settle in, breathe softly, let the quiet story of fire guide you toward rest. Music deepens low, slow drone. Faint ember crackle continues. Before there were tools or tailies, there was only the dark, vast, endless, and alive with sounds unknown. Beneath a star-heavy sky, small bands of early humans moved through the night, wary and watchful. The cold crept close. The wind whispered through tall grass. Then, in the distance, a shimmer of orange. Lightning had struck dry earth, and the forest burned. They watched from afar, frightened, but unable to look away. The flames hissed and danced, fierce and bright, a creature of light that devoured all it touched. Yet, in its glow, shadows fled, and the air grew warm. Something stirred in them, not just fear, but fascination. Perhaps one, braver or more curious than the rest, stepped closer. The heat kissed their skin, the air shimmered like a living veil, and then a trembling hand reached out and lifted a glowing branch, an ember pulsing gently like a heart. That fragile spark was the first light humanity ever held. They could not yet create it, but they learned to keep it, guarding it through wind and rain, feeding it with dry grass and careful breath. And so began the long journey from fear to mastery, from darkness to the dawn of understanding. Fire did not arrive in brilliance, but in wonder, and tonight, we follow that same gentle glow. The accidental spark, the story of fire, and of us, truly begins not with a single moment of discovery, but with many quiet encounters across thousands of years. Long before humans learned to strike a spark, they learned to notice one. In those ancient ages, the earth was a restless place. The sky often flashed with storms, and the ground itself sometimes tore open with the deep breath of volcanoes. Trees would blaze, grass would vanish into smoke, and the air would shimmer with heat. Fire was not rare, but it was wild, untamed, unpredictable, and alive. Our early ancestors, beings we would hardly recognize as human today, lived at the edge of that wildness. They moved carefully through tall grasses, gathering roots, hunting small creatures, and watching the horizon. And sometimes, they saw light, a glowing orange flicker against the night, like the sun refusing to rest. They did not yet understand what it was. Fire could destroy their world in an afternoon, but from afar it also called to them. The warmth, the movement, the beauty of it. Something inside recognized its power. Perhaps, at first, they stayed far away. They waited until the flames died, until only the blackened earth remained. Then, slowly, they approached. The forest that had burned was still alive with heat. The air smelled of ash and change. Among the charred logs lay something unexpected. The remains of animals caught in the blaze. The meat, once raw and tough, had been transformed. It was softer, fragrant, easier to chew and digest. Without knowing it, early humans had stumbled upon one of the most important discoveries in history. Cooked food. It is hard for us to imagine just how miraculous that must have seemed. In a world where every meal was a test of endurance, where chewing could take hours and sickness often followed. The fire had done something strange and kind. It made food better. The fire was dangerous, yes, but also generous. So they returned. Again and again, watching, waiting, learning its moods. Over time, they began to see that the glowing embers at the edges of a burned forest could last through the night. They noticed that when the wind blew too strong, the flame vanished, but when dry leaves were added, it grew brighter. Observation turned to understanding, and understanding, slowly, to intention. One evening, perhaps after many generations, someone dared to reach out with a stick, to lift a coal still glowing faintly red. It hissed and smoked, but they carried it back to shelter, shielding it from wind with their hands. Others gathered around, eyes wide in the darkness. For the first time, the flame was brought home. They did not yet know how to make it, but they learned how to keep it alive. This was humanity's first form of technology, not creation, but preservation. They learned to feed the fire with dry grass, with bark and broken branches. They learned how to cover it with ashes to keep it warm through the night. When they moved from place to place, they carried embers wrapped in hollowed wood or animal bone. Fire was not yet their servant. It was their fragile companion. Imagine the sight. A dark cave lit by a trembling flame, shadows dancing against rough stone, the sound of soft breathing, of crackles and whispers. Outside, the cold and the predators waited, but within, there was light, warmth, and the first quiet feeling of safety. Perhaps around that first fire, a sense of time was born, for in its glow, night was no longer endless. The flame marked the hours, its fading a reminder to wake and tend it, its brightness a promise of morning. They began to associate fire with more than survival. It became a rhythm, a presence that followed them through seasons. The elders remembered how it was saved, how it was lost, how it could die if left hungry. The young learned through imitation, watching hands that knew the balance between smoke and spark. This was how knowledge began to travel, not through words yet, but through gesture and memory. Fire became a silent teacher. Some scholars believe that the first fires kept by humans may date back more than 1,000,000 years. Charred bones and blackened stone circles have been found in places like Kenya and South Africa. Ancient hearths where early hominids, perhaps Homo erectus, once sat in the flicker of their guarded light. Each fragment of ash tells the same story, that before we ruled the world, we learned to tend its smallest flame. In that age of beginnings, fire changed everything. Even before it was truly mastered, it warmed the body, yes, but it also awakened the mind. It gave shape to the night, order to the day, and a fragile sense of control over a world that had once been purely wild. The flame taught patience. It taught attention. And it taught the earliest humans something they had never practiced before: care. For to keep fire alive was to think beyond the moment, to imagine the future, even if only the next dawn. So, the accidental spark became a tradition, passed from hand to hand, from family to family, from age to age. And though no one knew it then, that kid act, the guarding of a glowing ember, would set humanity on a path toward everything that would follow. Language, art, memory, invention, every civilization, every dream, every light that would someday shine in a city window began there. Beside that first trembling flame, held carefully against the dark. As you rest now, imagine that fire flickering at the edge of night. Its glow has never truly gone out. It has traveled through time, through every generation, to reach you here, warm, gentle, steady. And as we move onward in our story, that small, ancient spark will grow brighter. The leap to control the ember had been kept alive for generations. Carried through rain and drought, it had become a quiet constant, a sign of knowledge shared, of wisdom whispered. But there would come a time when accident was no longer enough. humanity would need to learn not only to keep fire, but to create it. For countless ages, people had lived in a delicate rhythm, borrowing flame from the earth's temper, from storms and wildfires, from nature's unpredictable moods. When fire died, they waited again for lightning, for the sky's anger to fall upon the trees. But patience alone could not last forever. There must have been a night, perhaps one of many, when the embers went cold, and the tribe sat in the dark. The memory of warmth lingered, but the secret of it was gone. That night, they must have stared at the cold ashes and wondered if the light had truly been lost forever. Yet curiosity, that ancient spark within us, would not stay silent. Someone, somewhere, began to wonder. Could it be summoned again? The first firemakers were not inventors in the way we think of them today. They were observers, quiet minds who had watched sparks leap from stone when struck, who had seen dry branches smoke when twisted in the heat of the sun. They began to test and to try, guided not by knowledge, but by patience and imagination. Imagine it. A figure crouched beside a dry log, two sticks clutched between rough hands. The movement is slow, rhythmic, almost meditative, wood against wood, friction against time. A faint thread of smoke appears, fragile and uncertain. The air smells of effort and hope, and then a flicker, a single, trembling flame rises, and the world changes once again. From that moment onward, humanity no longer depended on the sky's temper. Fire had become theirs to call upon. It was an awakening, the birth of control, the dawn of technology. Over time, methods evolved. Some learned to spin wooden drills with cords of sinew or vine, the bow drill, ancestor to all engines of motion. Others discovered that striking pyrite against flint showered sparks like falling stars. Each discovery carried the same quiet magic, the ability to create light from nothing, to summon warmth from the cold. Archaeologists have found traces of these early triumphs scattered across the world. Blackened stones in the caves of Shakudian in China, layers of ash at Geshabunat Yaakov in Israel, burnt bones deep in the soil of Africa and Europe. Each site tells the same story of people gathering, tending, teaching, repeating. Around the hearth, fire became the heart of every group. It marked a place of return, a circle of warmth in a world of endless cold. Food was shared there, tools were shaped, and bonds were formed in its glow. It was both practical and sacred. The firemaker held quiet honor. To strike the first spark was to call life back into being. To lose it was to risk hunger, cold, and fear. In this way, the keeping of flame became ritual, one of humanity's first sacred duties. As the generations passed, the flame grew stronger, steadier. The nights were no longer so long. The darkness was no longer something to fear. Fire had become both shield and teacher, protector and muse. It is humbling to think how fragile those first flames must have been. A single gust could undo hours of work. A careless hand could scatter embers into dust. Yet, through that fragility, a new kind of strength emerged. The strength of persistence. The leap to control was not sudden. It took centuries, perhaps millennia, of learning and but in that slow patience lay something deeply human. The desire not just to survive, but to understand. To make rather than to wait. The flame that once belonged to the earth now answered to human hands, and with it came the first hint of mastery, not over nature itself, but over fear. Soft pause. The sound of crackling fades slightly by the light of their fires. Our ancestors began to see the world differently. The darkness was no longer an enemy. The night became a time for gathering, for mending tools, for murmured voices and quiet dreams. It was the beginning of comfort, a feeling as old as humanity itself. And so, from one small spark came a revolution, a simple act. Two stones struck together, a branch rubbed against another, would open the path to everything that followed. The fire no longer ruled them. They ruled the fire, and in that gentle glow, humanity began to realize that it could shape not only its tools, but its destiny. Revolutionizing human life, once the flame was no longer a stranger, it began to transform everything it touched. What had started as a fragile spark, carried from lightning's wrath, became the quiet heart of human life. For the first time in history, warmth was no longer a gift of the sun alone. The night, once endless and cold, could now be softened. The wind outside might howl, but within the circle of light, there was calm. The shadows danced not as threats, but as companions. Imagine, dear listener, the scene. A small gathering in the mouth of a cave. Faces painted with light and dark, hands reaching toward the gentle glow. Beyond the fire's reach, the forest hums, unseen. But within that circle, today's safety, a place where stories, and perhaps laughter, begin. Fire changed how we lived, but also how we felt. It offered more than warmth. It offered peace. The hearth as home, the fire became the center of every camp. It was where people ate, rested, healed, and remembered. The hearth marked the first indoors, the first sense of home. Its light created boundaries between danger and comfort, between wilderness and belonging. For the first time, there was evening, a time not for hunting or gathering, but for simply being. This was where language likely began to bloom. In the flicker of light, gestures turned into words. Voices softened into rhythm and tone. Stories, perhaps first told as warnings of storms, of beasts, of memory, slowly became tales of imagination, passed from generation to generation. The fire did not just feed the body, it fed the mind. The fire within the meal, but perhaps fire's most profound gift was its quiet transformation of food. Raw flesh and roots once demanded endless chewing and fierce digestion. Cooked food, however, released energy more easily, energy that the growing human brain could use. Some scientists believe that this shift from raw to cooked allowed our ancestors' brains to expand, fueling new levels of thought, creativity, and social complexity. In a sense, every idea, every invention, every dream that followed may have begun with that first roasted meal. Fire unlocked nourishment that no claw or fang ever could. It made food safer, longer lasting, and more abundant. It allowed more time. Time not spent gnawing and tearing, but thinking, sharing, and resting. The fire was, in truth, the first silent teacher of leisure. And through leisure, reflection was born, the spark of craft around the same glow. Another transformation took place. With heat came experimentation. When wood was placed too close to flame, it hardened, perfect for the tips of spears. When stones were heated, they flaked differently, sharper, cleaner. When sticky tree sap melted near the fire, it could be used as glue, binding stone to shaft, tool to hand. Each discovery led to another. The fire that once frightened our ancestors now whispered secrets of invention. It became the first workshop, the first forge, though they did not yet have words for either. Every flicker of flame was a question. What else can this do? And humanity, with quiet curiosity, began to answer. The fire in the mind, but beyond warmth, beyond cooking, beyond the craft of tools, something deeper happened in those firelit nights. The flame gave form to thought itself. It reflected in their eyes, mirroring something newly alive within a growing awareness of time, of cause and effect, of planning and consequence. The fire did not merely burn wood, it burned away fear of the unknown. In its steady rhythm, early humans found a pattern that matched their own heartbeat. They learned patience, watching how flame consumed, how smoke drifted, how embers glowed long after the blaze had faded. These lessons were quiet, but profound. Fire taught foresight. Gather wood before night. It taught caution, guard the spark from wind and rain. It taught sharing. Warmth could not be hoarded. In every way, fire made them more human. The circle of light is the generations past. Every community had its flame. To lose it was unthinkable, like losing the soul of the tribe. When groups traveled, they carried embers in hollowed wood or animal horn. Those glowing coals became symbols of continuity, of belonging. And so the simple act of keeping a fire alive became ritual. Perhaps the first human ceremony. Each flame was linked, one to another, across ages and continents. an unbroken chain of lights stretching back through time. Fire, in this way, was not just a discovery, it was a bond. Even now, when we light a candle, or sit beside a quiet hearth, or watch the shimmer of a campfire beneath the stars, we are repeating that ancient gesture. We are remembering the same comfort, the same warmth, the same small miracle that once changed everything. The revolution of fire was not about power, it was about connection. It bound humans to one another, and to the world around them. It allowed our ancestors to look beyond survival, and to begin imagining what might come next. And so, from the first hearths of stone and ash, humanity began to grow not only in strength, but in mind. From here, the story turns inward, to thought, to imagination, to the shaping of ideas. For the next great leap would not be physical, but cognitive, the awakening of foresight and wonder. The cognitive shift, the flame, once only a source of warmth and light, began to touch something deeper, something invisible, but profoundly human. With fire, our ancestors did not just change their world, they began to change their minds. For the first time, there was planning. Fire required thought, preparation, care, and patience. One had to gather wood before nightfall, to shield the fire from the rain, to watch its hunger and feed it gently. The act of keeping the flame alive became an exercise in foresight, a lesson in cause and effect. Through this daily tending, a quiet shift occurred within the human mind. No longer did they simply react to the world, they began to anticipate it. They learned that their actions could shape tomorrow. And in that thought, the first spark of imagination was born. Fire as a teacher of time, the flame marked hours and seasons. When it burned low, it was time to rest. When it flared high, morning had come. The rhythm of tending fire gave rhythm to life itself. Humans began to understand that time could be measured, controlled, even used. They stored dry wood for the cold months, carried coals from camp to camp, learned to keep sparks hidden through long migrations. Each ember was a memory, a promise that warmth could be reborn. And so, carrying fire became not only a practical act, but a symbol of trust, of continuity, of connection between generations. To lose the fire was tragedy. To keep it alive was triumph. And every act of keeping it alive demanded something entirely new. Thought beyond the present moment. The mind awakes imagine, dear listener. The world before language, before words like yesterday, or tomorrow, or if. Now imagine sitting beside a small flame, watching it move and shift, learning how its breath responds to yours. You begin to predict its moods. You learn that too much fuel smothers it, too little lets it fade. In this simple relationship between flame and keeper, something miraculous happened. The human brain began to practice what we now call reasoning. The act of caring for fire may have been the first true collaboration between nature and thought. It demanded observation, understanding, and patience. The very roots of intelligence. Over countless nights, the flicker of firelight reflected in human eyes that now held awareness, reflection, and curiosity. Each spark mirrored a thought. Each flame mirrored the mind that watched it. From instinct to ingenuity before fire, survival had been instinct. Immediate, reactive, and raw. After fire, it became ingenuity. Thoughtful, planned, deliberate. They began to experiment not just with flame, but with ideas. If fire could cook meat, could it also harden clay? If it could chase away beasts, could it also protect crops or shape stone? Every question led to another, and with each small discovery, humanity stepped further away from instinct and closer to imagination. Fire, in its quiet way, became the first tool for thinking. The fire carriers as humans spread across vast landscapes through forests, deserts, and frozen plains. They took fire with them. Some carried it in hollowed bones, others in bundles of smoldering bark. It was precious, fragile, and alive. Their most valued possession. To carry fire was to carry the sun itself, to bring warmth where none existed. Whole journeys were built around protecting that glow. One misstep could mean cold, hunger, or darkness. So they learned vigilance, cooperation, and care, all of which would someday grow into community. leadership, and empathy. Keeping the fire alive became a shared duty, a form of early unity. Each person's survival depended on the discipline and foresight of another. Fire and abstract thought in the shimmering movement of flame, humans found more than utility. They found symbolism. The fire came to represent life itself, born, growing, needing care, and finally fading into ash. They began to see themselves reflected in it, fragile, bright, and temporary. From this awareness, abstract thought emerged. They began to see connections between things unseen, warmth and comfort, light and safety, life and death. These were the first quiet steps toward philosophy, spirituality, and the sense of something greater than the self. Perhaps, on some ancient night, a group sat in silence, watching the fire burn low. In the fading glow, they felt both wonder and sorrow, the first recognition that everything beautiful must eventually fade. And yet, even as the flame died, they knew it could be rekindled. From that realization came one of humanity's earliest truths, the cycle of renewal, a mind transformed by teaching us to protect, to plan, to imagine. Fire reshaped the human mind. It became the first mirror of consciousness, the living light by which we saw not only the world, but ourselves. Our ancestors did not know it, but in guarding that fragile glow, they were guarding the beginnings of thought, of creativity, of future. From this small miracle, everything that would come after art, music, story, science, found its seed. The fire that had once frightened became the mother of knowledge, the dawn of understanding. By the time humans truly mastered fire, they had already begun to master themselves. They could see beyond instinct, beyond need, beyond fear. And with that vision came the power to shape the world. The flame that flickered in their hands would one day glow in every corner of civilization, in lamps, in forges, in hearths, in hearts. The mind that once watched in awe had become the mind that understood. And so, as night deepens and the fire burns low, we leave our ancestors on the edge of a new world. A world lit not only by flame, but by thought. In the next chapter, we'll follow that light forward to its enduring legacy. We'll see how the fire that began with survival grew into ritual, culture, and the boundless energy that still fuels our world today. Our fiery legacy, the dawn that rose after fire's discovery, was unlike any before. For the first time, the world was not only illuminated by the sun, it was lit from below, by human hands. Flame became more than warmth, more than survival. It became memory. Each hearth became a small center of the world, a circle of stories, of laughter, of quiet reflection. Wherever people wandered, the fire followed a loyal companion, a reminder that even in the vast dark of the unknown, there was always light to return to. The hearth. As home, it is said that early humans carried fire with reverence, protecting it from the rain, feeding it like a living being. When they settled, they built around it. The hearth became the first true center of human life. Meals were cooked there. Tools were hardened there. And when the night grew long, stories were told, their tales of hunts, of dreams, of gods not yet named. The hearth was not only a physical place, it was the beginning of home, a space of belonging, of safety, of warmth against the cold indifference of nature. From this small circle of firelight grew villages, then towns, then cities, all built around the same ancient instinct. To gather, to share, to protect the glow. From flame to faith over time, fire began to take on deeper meaning. To some, it became the breath of the divine, the living proof the spirit existed within the world. Temples were built with sacred flames that burned without end, watched over by priests whose duty was to keep them alive. In Greece, the eternal fire of Hestia burned at the heart of every city. In Persia, the followers of Zoroaster tended holy flames as symbols of purity and truth. In Rome, the Vestal Virgins guarded a single flame said to protect the empire itself. Every culture found in fire a reflection of something eternal: life, spirit, rebirth. To extinguish the flame was more than a physical loss. It was a spiritual wound. And so, from the first campfire to the grandest temple, humanity's relationship with fire became a mirror of its relationship with the divine. Fragile, luminous, eternal, the forge of progress. As centuries passed, humans learned not only to keep fire, but to shape it. They bent it to their will, teaching it to melt, or to harden tools, to form weapons and art alike. In the flicker of the forge, new worlds were born: bronze, iron, steel. Each spark struck from the anvil carried humanity forward. Every hammer's echo whispered the same truth: progress was fire, and fire was progress. It was both creator and destroyer, building civilizations, and at times, burning them down. Yet even through destruction, it taught renewal, that from ash, new life could rise. The flame that once frightened our ancestors now burned in every corner of their creation. In lamps, in kilns, in hearths, fire and civilization. Fire marked the rhythm of human life, dawn to dusk, season to season, generation to generation. It allowed us to cook, to craft, to create. It guided explorers across oceans, fueled empires, powered revolutions. Every leap forward, from clay pot to steam engine, began with the same ancient curiosity. What else can fire do? And as our knowledge deepened, so did our dependence. From torches to lanterns, from candles to electricity. The light never left us. It merely changed form, passing quietly from flame to filament, from hearth to circuit. Even now, though our fires are hidden behind screens and engines, they are still there, glowing, humming, alive. The same ancient warmth that once danced in caves now flickers in cities that never sleep. The eternal symbol. Throughout all ages, fire has remained the symbol of the human spirit. Bright, restless, unending. It reminds us of our dual nature, capable of both creation and ruin, passion and peace. Every candle we light still whispers that same ancient lesson. That light must be tended, cared for, renewed. That even the smallest flame can hold back the vastness of the dark. Perhaps, in this very moment, as you listen to these words and feel the quiet comfort of imagination, you carry a spark of that first fire, the one that transformed us from wanderers to dreamers, the flame that taught us to plan, to hope, to imagine, the flame that built our world and still burns softly within our hearts. Fire is not only our legacy, it is our reflection, the first and oldest mirror of human thought. So, as night deepens and you rest, remember this. From the very first spark to the lights that glow in every window tonight, the story of fire is the story of us. And though its shape may change, its spirit never dies. It burns quietly in the warmth of memory, in the pursuit of knowledge, and in every flicker of the human heart. From fire to light, so now, dear listener, the story of fire nears its quiet end, or perhaps its new beginning. For though the flame still burns, it has changed shape many times, passing like a secret through the hands of countless generations, from that first trembling ember held by frightened hands on an African plain, to the forges of bronze and iron that sang the first songs of civilization, to the hearths that glowed at the heart of every home fire carried us here. It was never only a tool, it was a teacher and a mirror. Through it, we learned patience and precision. We learned how to plan, how to imagine, how to hope, and in its glow, humanity first saw the reflection of its own mind. Bright, creative, ever restless, the age of discovery. As centuries unfolded, the flame found new forms. The hearth gave way to lamps of oil, to candles that glimmered in quiet monasteries. 2 lanterns guiding travelers through fog and snow. Ships carried fire across oceans in their kitchens, their signal lights, their hearts. And wherever humans went, they brought the flame with them, hidden in coals or kindled anew. When great cities rose, their streets were lit by fire. Torches in iron brackets, gaslights flickering in the dusk. It was as though we had tamed the stars themselves and brought them down to earth. Yet Invention, we did not stop. Curiosity, that quiet ember in the human soul, still burned. One day, the ancient flame took a new form, invisible, silent, yet bright beyond measure. Electricity. The lightning we once feared became the newest fire. And for the first time, we did not just carry flame. We created light itself. From spark to current, when humans learned to summon power from wire and magnet, it was as though the fire had finally taken root within the bones of the earth. Coal and oil, the long-sleeping remains of ancient forests, gave their stored fire to fuel the world's growing hunger for light. Cities glowed all night long. Engines roared. The same warmth that once flickered on stone walls now pulsed in factories, in lamps, in homes. We built machines that burned fire without flame, heat without smoke, brilliance without wood. And though the hearths grew cold, the essence remained the same. Humanity and fire, together, shaping the world once more. Even the rockets that rise toward the stars burn with that same principle thrust-born of flame. Our oldest discovery still carries us forward, across oceans of darkness, into the endless night of space, the meaning that remains. Yet still, fire speaks to something ancient within us. A campfire beneath a starlit sky will always feel like home. The sound of crackling wood, the slow swirl of smoke. These are the echoes of our beginnings. In every flickering candle, there is a memory of that first ember. In every light bulb's glow, a continuation of that first courage. The moment when we reached out toward something we did not understand, and chose to keep it alive. Even in the digital age, when screens have replaced flames, we are still drawn to the glow, to gather around it, to share stories, to feel a quiet sense of connection. The form has changed, but the feeling endures. The circle of light. So the story comes full circle, from the wildfires of the ancient savanna to the soft hum of modern cities. Humanity has carried fire's legacy through every age. It has been our warmth, our weapon, our guide, our inspiration. It taught us to cook, to craft, to gather, to dream. It lit our myths and our machines alike. And though the future may hold new sources of light, from fusion to starlight, to the energy of worlds yet unseen, they're all part of the same story, the same flame, still burning softly in 1,000 forms. So, as you rest now, and the world grows still around you, imagine that faint orange glow, the same one that watched over our ancestors as they drifted to sleep in the dark of ancient nights, the same warmth that comforted them, that promised morning would come again. Fire began as a wild, untamed wonder. It became our companion, our teacher, and finally, our reflection. And though millennia have passed, its light is still here, glowing quietly in every home, every heart, and every dream that reaches for something brighter. Sleep well, dear listener. May the warmth of that ancient fire linger beside you, gentle, steady, eternal. And when you close your eyes, remember, you are part of the same story that began with a spark in the dark. Every meal you cook, every cozy evening by a fireplace, every illuminated space after dark, it all traces back to one incredible breakthrough. Discover the untold story of how our earliest ancestors didn't just survive, but thrived by harnessing the most powerful force on Earth. This isn't just about fire. It's about the very beginning of what makes us human. The ember never died now. Imagine once more the quiet of night. The fire has burned low. Only a single ember remains, glowing softly beneath a veil of ash. Its light flickers, gently, rhythmic as breath. The people who once gathered here are long gone, their laughter and stories carried away by the winds of ages. Yet, the ember still breathes. It waits, patient and eternal, for someone to find it again. That ember is us, the small, enduring spark of curiosity and wonder that has never gone out. Long after those first hands learned to protect it from rain and wind, the flame found new homes, not only in hearths, but in minds. It became the warmth of thought, the light of discovery, the fire of creativity that still burns quietly inside every one of us. Fire taught humanity more than how to survive the cold. It taught us how to kindle the light within. When we tell stories, when we seek knowledge, when we reach out to one another across time, we are tending that same ancient flame. It has no beginning, and it'll never end. Music deepens slightly. Warm, low strings and soft crackle blend. So, dear listener, as you drift toward sleep, remember, 'tis the light that once kept the dark at bay still lives within you. It is the same light that guided your ancestors through forests and storms, through hunger and hope. It glows not only in the hearth, but in the heart quiet, steady, eternal. Close your eyes now. Let the world grow still. Feel that warmth, not on your skin, but within your thoughts. The ember never died. It simply became you. And so, dear listener, the ember still burns. Thank you for sharing this quiet journey through history's earliest light. If you found peace in this story, please subscribe and join us again, where the past always whispers you to sleep.